What's up YouTube, Kronos here, and welcome back to another PSO2 guide video. So in today's video, we're going to talk about the current best in slot 13-star weapons that we have in the game, Nemesis and Slave Weapons. So I guess this is kind of not really fair to call a guide video, as much as it is more so just a little bit of a PSA, I suppose. We really want to talk about how strong these weapons truly are. Now, I didn't really give it too much credit. It was just the best weapon we had by far right now. It was pretty obvious it was one of the best weapons that we had both the series. But really looking back at the weapons that we have access to as we were going through 13-star and 14-star weapons, it's crazy how much stronger these really are. And the reason this conversation's even come up in the first place is a lot of people have this mindset that why bother with picking up these weapons? Yes, they'll be useful for 15 stars, but we're just going to replace them in a month and a half. When episode 4 comes out, we're just going to get new weapons anyway. What's the point? Well, the reality of the situation is episode 4 does introduce some new weapons, yes. It introduces some relatively powerful weapons in the wake of 14 stars, basically. However, there are two major things to keep in mind about these 14 stars. One, they are not sellable, meaning that unless you get the drop for your 14 star, you're not going to get it. And two, I guess technically this kind of goes along with one, to be fair. The only other way outside of getting the drop for that 14 star is a system that was implemented originally in episode 5. Now, granted, take that with a grain of salt. Obviously, this has been the NA release. Not everything has been exactly the same as the JP release, meaning they may release some content sooner. They may release some systems sooner. But even with the system that allowed us to grind the badges we needed to get the 14 stars that we actually wanted at the time, it still took a very, very long time to get those badges. For example, we had campaigns that would give us the badges as opposed to things in game that we'd be able to grind the badges from. They didn't drop from ultimate quests, or they didn't drop from urgent quests. They came from these campaigns specifically. Occasionally you would get lucky and there'd be something that would hand out one of those badges, or something would drop a badge, but in reality, you were getting maybe 50 badges maximum a week from a campaign, and you needed 500 of them to get the weapon that you actually wanted. And even then, that weapon was max grinds plus 30. At max element, which was nice, so don't get me wrong, that works well. And the difference between 30 and 35 isn't a huge difference, but for some weapons, you actually wanted them at plus 35 for later weapon turn-ins. Granted, these ones I don't think really mattered too terribly much, but it still kind of felt bad that you had to grind so long for that weapon, and it wasn't the strongest it can be. So, are Nemesis and Slave Weapons really that strong? Just keeping in mind that the 14 stars you guys are talking about getting a hold of are going to be something you can get a hold of in episode 4. Yeah, they really are. And we're actually going to take a look at that right now. So let's hop over. We've got the JP Wiki pulled up here, and I want to show you guys a few things. So we're going to scroll down. I mentioned this in another video, but I'm going to use the current tier weapon as an example. You'd think I'd learn to close Steam ahead of time, but I just don't. It just doesn't happen. Anyway, let's scroll on down. So this weapon here is a part of a series I just released on NA with the new UQ that we got. You can see the weapon is actually right here. Now this weapon, of course, is a new type version of a weapon. It's a new type weapons. I guess to do a quick explanation between new type and old type. On JP, their weapon grinding used to work the way our unit grinding works now. It was RNG based. You would basically spend grinders, you would grind up your weapon, and there was a chance that it would fail and go back a couple grinds. That since changed on JP, that's why on the Japanese wiki, you see their weapons that say NT, standing for new type. That follows the same upgrade path for weapons that we currently follow. We never get any old type weapons in the game. All of ours are new type weapons. So if you see a weapon and you see there's a new type variant for it on the JP wiki, you can assume that's the variant that we're actually going to get over here. Lucky for us, this weapon here that I'm using it as an example came out after the new type grinding came out, so it's fairly simple to follow. So we can see here, base damage, we can see its affixes. If we take a look at the NA servers, they're exactly the same. So you can assume that they're going to be the same when this information releases, or when these weapons release. Now, if we take a look at some of these other weapons to come down with, you can see that as the further down we go, usually the stronger the weapon is. Now, there are some exceptions, of course, but if we keep on going, right before we hit 14 star, you can see our Slave NT and our Nemesis NT, along with the Invade NT. These weapons are the exact same damage as our standard weapons are now. So people that are saying, hey, get your Ray weapons, they'll upgrade into Union weapons. They're absolutely right. But I've mentioned beforehand that yes, Ray will upgrade into Union. However, it's still weaker. So Ray weapon, same as the one we have here, right? Bam. We check out the Union version. See how much more power we actually gained. So we go down a fair amount. Actually, I think I might have already passed it. I did already pass it. I most definitely passed it. Because it's not that strong. Yeah, here we go. So Ray weapon was right about here. Union weapon is there. 1590. That's still a good amount of ways off of the amount of damage that our Slave and Nemesis weapons have. So yes, they will upgrade. You will get some more damage out of them. They have a solid potential that gives you extra damage as well. PP reduction, PP recovery, all those good things are going to be really, really nice. However, they're still not going to be stronger than Slave and Nemesis weapons. I know I kind of hate to drive this home, but they really are that strong. In episode 4, when we were grinding weapons, trying to get a hold of stuff, we had something called the collection file. Of course, you guys have seen that beforehand, right? Basically, you kill enemies of a specific type or clear certain quests, and it would have a bar that would go up. Once it reached 100, the item for that collection file would drop. You'd pick it up, and after you get all of the items you needed, you would get the item from the collection file. Now, at the time these weapons came out, you could get them from collection files. You could grind up what you needed, and you got really strong weapons. The Qualified weapons were kind of the quintessential best-in-slot weapon for the most part, outside of those rare drop 14 stars. You could grind for these weapons, and the reason they were so strong was because of Antithesis Trainer. Now, I'm probably going to butcher that. I might have just said it wrong, but I apologize. Essentially, this would double the affixes on your weapon. You got 14% damage buff, and you also got double the affixes. So if your weapon had 100 melee damage affix on it, you'd get 200. If it had 100 or 50 HP, you'd get 100 HP out of it. 10 PP, 20 PP. You get the idea. It would just double it. So a properly affixed Quifad, now granted, when I say properly, I mean like probably 6 to 7 slot, could out damage a slave weapon. Could, in theory. Again, I'm sorry I say slave, but in reality, you're looking at Nemesis, to be honest, because Sacred Shield's really, really good. But in theory, it could do it because you'd get enough base damage, plus the power you'd get from the weapon itself by base. You're doing pretty well. Granted, you didn't get the actual PP reduction, you didn't get the damage cut shield, but it was close enough. It wasn't like it was super far ahead one way or the other. And we don't even have these weapons yet. This is what comes in episode 4. This is what you get to grind for. And we already have a stronger version of the weapon. Weapons like the Homura weapons, this series right here didn't even come out till episode 5. This series here came out specifically to upgrade into a 14 star. I'm pretty sure that was at the beginning of episode 5 because people weren't getting the 14 stars they wanted. It was basically, a lot of people thought of it like a freebie 14 star because they hadn't gotten the one that they wanted from a drop. So they released this series you had access to that you could grind up. Now, granted, maybe they released the 13-star versions of these weapons early in episode 14 somewhere, right? That could happen. It gives us access to super special abilities, which are awesome. And it might introduce the system in early, which it could definitely happen. However, we don't know. If we're going based on the information that we have, in reality, you actually do have a lot of mileage that's going to come from your Slave and Nemesis weapon. Weapons like the Homura weapons were actually fairly powerful because of their potential. I believe the upgraded version of the Homura weapon was the stronger one. Yeah, it was the Xian or the Gurren version. This one was fairly powerful, and as you can see, has more base damage. I'm sorry, actually has more base damage on the Gurren version, not the Xian version. They had different potentials for each of them, depending on one casting D-ban on yourself at random intervals. I believe this one casts its Shifta. Yeah, so this actually was pretty cool to have these weapons. They were fairly strong. The series weapons were very good as well. But these weapons came around episode 5. So everyone that's mentioning, hey, don't worry about it. You're not, I'm not going to worry about it because I'm pretty much going to just get a better weapon in like a month or two. Not exactly. Keep that in mind. And also, these weapons still move into your first 15 stars. So at the end of the day, it's really not that bad. Now, granted, these 14 stars, they added in the potential. So as you can see, there's a blue version of this potential, the Thundering Blades Plus, that gives you more power. That ended up pushing some of these up to the use of the 15-star weapons. However, not a lot of them. Some of them really just didn't, they weren't up to par. For Bouncer specifically, Jupiter Tullus, it jumped right back into being one of the best in slot weapons for 15 or almost, over 15 stars that were available at the time. But in reality, when our 15-star comes out, you have 3 options. We'll either get the austerities, which we can prepare for in advance, which is kind of nice. I mean, people that had these weapons ready available were able to get their 15-star day one, which is pretty powerful. They have the Atlas EX, which you still needed some stuff to be able to upgrade into it, so you still had to do a bit of farming for this. Technically, it is more powerful than the austere, but if you have multiple weapons on your class, it's not a bad idea to have, access to some of these things. And of course, the Lightstream weapon. And the Lightstream weapon required you killing a boss that you only could fight once per time it showed up. So it was an urgent quest. And you had to kill it 50 times to get the item that you needed to make this weapon. 50 kills, meaning you weren't picking this up fairly early on. If you happen to be one of those players that multi-shipped, and what multi-ship basically means is that you have a character on each one of the servers, and whenever that UQ popped up, you would complete on each one of your characters. Since titles were cross-server, you could do it 3 times, depending on the amount of time it actually took to get this weapon. So it made it easier to get the weapon, but it still required some time. That's why I've been mentioning beforehand that, I mean, granted, I always thought they were just really good to use in first place, but reality, looking back at the access to the weapons we actually have, the Slave and the Nemesis weapons being out right now is actually ridiculously overpowered. It is crazy how much stronger these weapons are. In most cases, you will probably use your Nemesis and Slave weapon through most of episode 4, if not the entire thing, unless they change how they release some content. Now, again, they could change how they release the content. Maybe there'll be one of these other weapons, say the Xian or the Gurren weapons, that'll pop up sooner. You have to remember, the Slave and the Nemesis weapons for us, by the time these came out, it was literally when they released the 15-star. Like, this 15-star was put in place for people who had the old 13 stars. And then people who didn't have those old 13 stars and wanted that 15-star had these weapons put into the game. That way they could farm for them. So we just have them now. These were added in when 15 stars came around, which is kind of nutty. So again, take it with a grain of salt. It might be different, but people are mentioning, hey, look, you're going to get a better weapon when episode 4 drops. Don't expect to get a weapon immediately. It may not be that easy. Now, granted, it could be. We might be able to get something like, granted, we weren't expecting the event that we just got that is allowing us to get a crazy amount of badges that we need for our Ray units and for our Ray weapons if we want them. But we also don't want to make baseless claims. So I want to make sure I bring all of you guys the information that you have to make sure you can make your own informed decisions. So again, if you guys have any questions, any comments, anything that you want to add to any of this, feel free to toss in the comments below. A like is much appreciated and absolves you of half of your adbot guilt, and the other half is absolved by subscribing and keeps up with the content, both things being completely free and makes you feel all warm and fuzzy on the inside. Anyway, guys, thanks for joining me on this one, and I'll see you on the next one. Take care. Peace out.